The Tyrannic Wars, from 745 M41 to 999 M41. The Tyrannic Wars are the collective conflicts ignited by the Tyranid species' sudden incursion into the Milky Way galaxy, beginning in 745 M41 by the Imperial calendar. It all started with a Hive fleet behemoth. The first recorded encounter with the Tyranids occurred in the eastern fringe of the galaxy and was documented in reports from the planet Tyran. An Adeptus Mechanicus Explorator research station identified a collection of worlds in the area that had been stripped bare of their biomass and atmosphere. The station was subsequently attacked and consumed. A standard year later, an Imperial Inquisitor named Fidus Cryptman, who received information regarding the attack, arrived on Tyran to investigate. After searching the planet, he chanced upon a data codex hidden deep within the planet's crust, which contained information about the invaders. The information collected by the explorators on Tyran allowed him to identify the pattern of attacks and predict the course of the Hive fleet. However, these predictions came too late. Several more civilizations were wiped out, largely because astropaths could not send psychic requests for help because of a phenomenon known as the shadow in the warp. Somehow, the presence of a Tyranid Hive fleet near a planet stops psychic communication and transportation through the warp, which is the primary method of interstellar communication and transport used by the Imperium's astropaths and warp drive-equipped starships. The Tyranny Force, dubbed Hive Fleet Behemoth in a rare moment of literary imagination at Imperial command, cut a swath through the realm of Ultramar, the interstellar domain of the Ultramarines chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. Undeterred by the Space Marines chapter fleet, the behemoth reduced Prandium, the garden world once known as the Jewel of Ultramar, to bare rock. Eventually, Chapter Master Manius Kalgar mustered his entire force for a last-ditch defense of the Ultramarines' homeworld of Makridge. Here, during the Battle of Makridge, the Hive fleet was completely destroyed with the aid of the Imperial Navy's entire battle fleet Baka and the sacrifice of the Emperor-class battleship Dominus Astra. However, the Ultramarines suffered heavy losses, losing their entire veteran First Company in a last stand at the world's northern polar fortress. The Hive fleet, Kraken, in 993 M41. The second wave of Tyranids to assault the Imperium was designated Hive Fleet Kraken. Instead of throwing one mass of bioforms against the human armies, this Tyranid swarm split into countless smaller splinter fleets, each one enveloping whole star systems before reinforcements could arrive. The Kraken was finally brought to battle on a grand scale at Ikar 4, an Imperial Hive world, in 993. The brunt of this attack was borne by the skiffs of the Emperor and Lamenter's chapters of the Space Marines and the Asuriani craft world Yanden, all of whom suffered very heavy losses. According to Lieutenant Cage of the Last Chance's penal regiment, the Astra Militarum, lost over 1 million men at Ikar 4. Though this may serve simply to illustrate in a very broad sense the scale of the combat against the Kraken, as, numerically speaking, 1 million soldiers is not a great burden for an entire Hive world to expend in its defense, since it is home to billions of people. The Kraken was not fully destroyed after the engagements at Ikar 4 and Yundin, and split into several smaller splinter fleets which have continued to represent major threats to the Imperium as they spread and grow like a Xenos cancer upon the galaxy. To add to that, there was little respite for the Imperium after the Kraken's near destruction, as a new and even larger Hive fleet invaded the galaxy. Hive Fleet Leviathan in 997 M41. The third, and by far the largest wave of Tyranid attacks, Hive Fleet Leviathan appeared from below the galactic plane and attacked from 2 points in 997, cutting off large portions of the galaxy from Imperial reinforcements. In order to buy time, the Imperial forces under the command of Inquisitor Fidus Cryptman of the Ordo Xenos attempted to redirect the attacks of the Hive Fleet towards the Orc-held worlds of the Orc Empire of Octarius in the Octarius sector. While the plan proved a success, the Tyranids have since been steadily working their way through Orc space in what became known as the Octarius War, suffering massive losses, assimilating everything that stood before them. The Imperium bought itself a few solar decades to prepare for the next attack, but there was no telling how the Tyranids might further evolve thanks to the newly harvested Orcoid DNA. Hive Fleet Leviathan also attacked around the same time as Hive Fleet Kraken, making both Hive Fleets difficult to deal with for the Imperium, as the elements of one or the other would provoke some sort of uprising by the Gene Stealer cults, or invade Imperial worlds outright in the Great Devourer's eternal quest for more biomass to enhance its Hive Fleet's reproduction rates. To date, Behemoth is the only Tyranid Hive fleet that did not divide its mass into different tendrils comprised of splinter fleets that attacked Imperial space from several different locations at once, and it suffered the consequences of being less strategically minded than its successors. Yet the Tyranids' goal remains clear. An analysis of their fleet movements through the galaxy has determined that they are being drawn by the potent psychic beacon of the Astronomicon towards one destination: Holy Terra. The 13th Black Crusade in 995-999 M41. The 13th Black Crusade is the most recent and the greatest of the incursions launched against the Imperium by Abaddon, the Despoiler, and was the greatest conflict fought between the forces of Chaos and the Imperium of Man since the HORUS heresy. Under the command of the War Master of Chaos, the traitor legions poured out from the Eye of Terror, emptying 100 demon worlds and bursting into real space in hitherto unforeseen numbers. The armies of chaos started at the Cadian Gate in a great push towards Terra. The goal of the Chaos forces was the fortress world of Cadia, the capture of which was the ultimate goal of the forces of chaos, since it would allow them to create a forward base for a new drive upon Terra to topple the Emperor from the Golden Throne and end their long war. Rumors persisted that the demon Primarchs rode at the head of the armies of the traitor legions, returned to the mortal realm to usher in the end times. Imperial forces counterattacked, but there was no end to the forces of the Dark Gods. Despite the best efforts of the Imperium's staunchest defenders, including the Black Templars, Imperial Fists, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves, Cadia, linchpin of the defenses surrounding the Cadian Gate, eventually fell to chaos after Abaddon himself arrived with an even larger force of the Black Fleet following Cadia's successful defense of the first Chaos incursion. After a further heroic Imperial effort led by the Lord Castellan Ursarkar E. Creed and the living Saint Celestine delayed the War Master of Chaos plans to personally seize the prize he had long coveted, Abaddon deployed one of the black stone fortresses he had acquired in the Gothic War, the Will of Eternity. Destroyed by the Imperial Fist's mobile star fortress Phalanx before its warp cannon could be used to eliminate all life on Cadia, the despoiler turned even the fortress's floating corpse into a weapon. Its massive remains were flung from orbit onto the surface of Cadia as an artificial meteor, its kinetic impact killing most of its remaining defenders and at last allowing the Eye of Terror to swallow the world whole. The geothermal stress caused by the fortress's impact ultimately caused Cadia to rip itself apart. With it and its war-propulsing black stone pylons destroyed, the Eye of Terror began to expand across the galaxy in what the Chaos forces called the Crimson Path, even as Abaddon at last realized his dream of seizing the Cadian Gate for the forces of chaos. With the first goal of the 13th Black Crusade achieved, he next turned to launching an assault upon Terra itself. However, the inherent fractious nature of his forces, combined with the unexpected continued resistance of Imperial forces remaining in the Cadian Gate region, slowed the Chaos advance as the heretics began to consolidate their gains. A new Chaos Empire soon grew up around the shattered remains of Cadia itself. Finally, even as multiple calamities loomed over the Imperium, on Terra, the Adeptus Mechanicus secretly reported to the High Lords of Terra in 986-999 that the mechanisms of the Golden Throne were failing, and they no longer possessed the knowledge required to repair that ancient piece of technology. Unless something could be done, the God Emperor would die, and then humanity would face the drawing darkness alone. In the meantime, during the 13th Black Crusade, the Tau used the redeployment of Imperial forces to the Segmentum Obscurus to initiate the Third Sphere expansion of their empire in the eastern fringe of the galaxy, unleashing what became known among Imperial historians as the Zeist Campaign, the Prefecture Campaign, and the Second Agrellan Campaign. The war led to massive casualties amongst the Imperial and Xenos forces before the Tau Empire's expansion briefly came to an end following the Exterminatus unleashed upon their sept of Mugulath Bay following the Second Agrellan Campaign. Guilliman awakens in circa 999 M41. Strange events. The appearance of the ancient Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Call and a cryptic alliance with a mysterious Eldari faction known as the Yanari conspired to awaken the Ultramarines Primarch Robert Guilliman from his millennia-long slumber in a stasis chamber in the northern polar regions of Makridge during the Ultramar campaign of the 13th Black Crusade. The Primarch was immediately embroiled in battle upon awakening after a chaos assault was unleashed by the Black Legion upon the shrine of Guilliman in the Temple of Correction, where he had long slumbered as Abaddon sought to prevent his return. Once Ultramar was saved from the assaults of chaos through the actions of the resurrected Primarch, his Ultramarines and their successor chapters, Guilliman embarked on the Terran Crusade to meet with his father, the Emperor, for the first time in 10,000 standard years. What transpired at the meeting within the Imperial Palace on Terra is unknown, but at its conclusion, Guilliman was restored to his ancient role as the Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, the first among equals on the Senatorum Imperialis. The Primarch proceeded to purge the High Lords of Terra of those officials he found corrupt and incompetent.